It's quite insulting to be called an animal. However, even those among us who don't believe that humanity evolved from monkeys will still concede that we share many common characteristics with the animal kingdom. Sifra Detsniuta, one of the oldest and most significant parts of the Zohar, presents a conception of the essence of who and what we are as incorporating both a divine side and also an animal side. Sifra Detsniuta traces this back to the story of the creation of humanity on the sixth day of creation. On one hand, we are told there that humanity is created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. But also, that being created on the sixth day, humanity did not receive a special day to designate the creation of humanity. Rather, we are created together with animals on the sixth day. So we have an animal side and a divine side. Now, the idea that of two sides inside of us is very well known from the Tanya, the basic work of Chabad thought. How Tanya talks about the nefesh elokit and the nefesh behemit, the divine soul and the animal soul. However, there's a fundamental difference between the approach to these two sides by Sifra Detsniuta to the approach of the Tanya. The Tanya sees each of us as in a constant struggle. The two sides inside of me are fighting, are struggling. Who will overcome the other side? And the goal is having our divine soul to overcome and even annihilate the animal side within us. On the other hand, Sifra Detsniuta sees both sides inside of us as given by God. And what we're looking for is not a struggle between the sides, but rather finding the proper balance between them. Sin, according to the Zohar, is defined when the animal side goes beyond its proper boundaries, but not in the very existence of that side inside of us. The Zohar sees the positive necessity for this animal side. The Zohar writes that when the divine and the animal sides are bound together, that allows us to give birth. On a simple level, this could be talking about giving birth to children, that certainly we need the physical side to give birth. But I think that passage is telling us an even more significant statement, that giving birth means creativity in general. The source of creativity is the forging together of that animal, the physical sides, the vital life forces ebbing inside of us, to interacting with our spiritual side. It's the linkage of these two parts inside of us that's the source of creativity. And in fact, in Hebrew, the word for creativity, yitziratiut, and creation, yitzira, comes from the word yetzer, which is the word used for the inclination inside of us, the physical drives, the eros that keep pushing us to do things that we do. So we have two very different approaches to how to relate to the animal inside of us. The Zohar sees the beginning of this week's Parsha, Parashat Vayikra, in this light. The Parashat Vayikra deals with offerings of animals in the Beit HaMikdash, and the Hebrew verse says, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lashem min habehema. A person who offers from you to God from the animal. And this is explained homiletically by the Zohar, that we give from us, from the animal, means that the offering that we bring in front of God is from the animal inside of us. That animal inside of us, we try to offer it and uplift it and present it to God. There is a famous debate between Hasidic masters that touches on these two different approaches to relating to the animal. The opening verse of Parshat Lech Lecha is Lech Lecha me'artzecha. There's a teaching of the Zohar that Lech Lecha, which is translated literally as go to you, is a call by God to embark on a journey to discover our inner self. Go to you. Go to yourself. Discover yourself. The next word, me'artzecha, is translated, me'artzecha is from your land, but is retranslated in Chassidut as me'artzecha, from your artziut, from your earthiness. Go to yourself from your earthiness. Now the Maggid, the famous student of the Baal Shem Tov, explains this as saying, Lech Lecha, the way that you're going to get to yourself is me'artzecha, by removing yourself from your earthiness. Separate yourself from your physical side, and that's how you'll ultimately arrive at your inner essence. And this is appropriate since from the Maggid students, the Tanya and Chassidus Chabad evolved. And this is the approach, seeing the physical, the animal side inside of us is impeding our connection to God. On the other hand, Rav Naftali Merupshitz, he explains the verse in an opposite fashion. He says, Lech Lecha me'artzecha is saying, go to yourself from your earthiness. From inside your earthiness, you have the forces that will allow you to ultimately discover and arrive at your inner self. Now, yet in another context, this idea of the Sifra Detsniuta, of the Zohar, appears in our Parsha. Our Parsha begins, Vayikra el Moshe. God calls out to Moshe. And in that first word, Vayikra, the last letter, the letter Aleph, is written very much smaller than all the other letters. The Medrash explains that this reflects the humility of Moshe, that Moshe was very humble, so the Aleph representing the first letter of Adam, a man, the Aleph is small to reflect his humility. The Zohar quotes this Medrash and gives an opposite interpretation. The Aleph is not praising Moshe, but rather quite the opposite. The Zohar writes that in order to commune with God, Moshe had to separate himself from his wife. And the lack of ability to commune with the divine while being still connected to one's wife, connected to the physical aspects of life, that reflects a lack of completeness in Moshe, and therefore the small Aleph. However, just as there's a little Aleph in Tanakh, there's also a big Aleph in Tanakh. There's a place in Tanakh that the letter Aleph is written much larger than the letters around it, and that's in the first word of Divrei Hayamim. Divrei Hayamim begins giving us the genealogy of the world, starting from the beginning, and starting from Adam, and the first letter of Adam, the letter Aleph, there is written with a big letter Aleph. And the Zohar says, because as opposed to Moshe, the original state of humanity, before the fall from Gan Eden, that original state allowed, we were able to commune with the divine without separating ourselves from the physical. And in that way, Adam initially was complete, body and soul together, and that's why his Aleph is the big Aleph. And I think we're living in a generation that more and more there's talk about body and soul as not competing with each other, but rather fruitfully interacting with one another. And I think this is a trend, a search, a journey, the linkage between body and soul, which is ultimately bringing us back to that initial state of mankind in Gan Eden. Shabbat Shalom.